Albion Online Solo Dungeon. It is time to test tier 8 flat scrolls and if they are worth it to run them. What we did is we bought 50 tier 8 dungeon map scrolls with no enchants, and we ran all of them and collected all of the data that we needed. Now there are some rules for this test that we applied to this to kind of make the data more fresh and more realistic to the average player. First off, we cleared every single mob in the dungeon. We want to make sure that we get all the silver that they drop, as well as any chance of a loot bag dropping for potential gains on our silver at the end of the runs. We also avoid PvP at all costs. We are running these tier 8 scrolls in the Outlands, and we are running them in the adjacent zones to the Fort Sterling portal. So what we do is we stand in there, we proc a scroll, and then we run out and we get into the dungeon. We wait the 90-second timer for the dungeon to close on the outside so that no one else can come in, and then we run the dungeon safely. But at the end of the day, we're trying to see how much profit we get from this, and we're not trying to PvP and have a potential to lose any of the sets that we're wearing. On top of that, 99% of the time in the Outlands, somebody's running in a group. So because we are running solo dungeons by ourselves, most of the time if someone jumps into our dungeon and starts fighting, we have no idea what's going on the outside. If they are a group of 2, 3, 4, or if it's like 5 people sitting outside the dungeon waiting to dive in case things go wrong for their one buddy that's diving the dungeon. So to make everything simple and to act as a pure solo player just trying to make silver, we are not engaging in PvP at all. And if we did, we didn't account for it at all in the profit gains for this video. All right, enough talking. Let's go over the math and do all the calculations. So to buy the 50 tier 8 dungeon scrolls, we had to spend 2,433,500 silver. And the mobs in the dungeon, just mobs dropping silver on the ground that you automatically pick up, we got 1.2 million silver from their drops. On this run, we did die twice. We died from players twice, and collectively we lost 280k worth of silver, which we will account for in the total loss for this run. And now we can go over the chests that were inside of the dungeon. So for the end boss chest, this is when you get to the end of the dungeon. It's the final boss, and this is the color of the chest. We had no gold chests. Again, we had no gold chests in the 50 tier 7 dungeon runs. We have no gold chests here, and it's sad to see, but we're just going to go on. We have 5 purple chests, we have 38 blues, and we have 7 chests or 7 dungeons, I should say, that we didn't even finish. Those 7 dungeons, 2 of those I actually got killed and lost my gear. The other 5, we sat in the dungeon, we had the timer, someone ended up invading us, or a group invaded us. We were able to get out and get our bubble and just run away and reset and go grab a scroll, save our gear. We fought another day with a new scroll and did another dungeon. We just kept rolling with it until we got all 50 of the dungeons through. Unfortunately, 7 of them happened to be duds, but that's just part of running this data, especially in the Outlands Black Zone. Stuff like that is always going to happen. Now for this one, I did track the side chests. This would be any side chest on the way to the end boss in the dungeon, be it a green chest, a blue chest, purple, or any book chests that are relevant in these tier 8 dungeons, and I'll explain that here in a bit, as well as gold chests. So to go down the list, we have 18 green, 17 blue, we had 5 purple chests, we had 2 purple book chests, and the reason I put this data down is because in tier 8 flat dungeons, when you get a purple book chest, it drops Adept Tombs of Insight. And the thing with these is that you can actually sell them. So they drop in like stacks of like 7 or 8 from what I've seen in my testing. Those rack up to be like what, like 120 to 150k, somewhere around that range, but that's profit that could be used. And we also got 1 gold chest. It only had like 600k in it, but we actually finally got a gold chest in running some of these dungeons. Overall, it took us 13 hours to complete all of the dungeons, and it would have taken a little bit longer if we didn't have 7 did not finishes, but it is what it is. We're trying to keep this data as realistic as possible again. So 13 hours to run all the dungeons. So now we're going to actually show the loot that we got, and then we'll show the final calculations for the hourly that we got, including loss and without loss. So this is my tab of all the dungeon loot that we have. We're just going to scroll down here and we're going to look at the silver bags. So we have like 1.6 million worth of silver bags, as well as 108k worth of these silver bags. And we have tons of like just garbage on the bottom, and runes and souls and relics and whatnot. But this is how it all adds up. We have about almost 9 mil sitting in here right now. And we'll also add the silver bags. So if we look at all of this loot as one, including the silver bags, we're looking at a total profit of 11,928,000 silver. That is not including the loss. If we include the loss, we are sitting at 9,215,000 silver. That is the profit on both sides, and if you divide both of those by our 13 hours that it took, we get our hourly rate for running these dungeons. With the loss, we have 708k per hour, and without the loss, we are running 917k per hour. The one we really want to look at is the hourly with the loss, because that accounts for all of the scrolls that we had to buy, all the silver we had to spend, as well as all the silver we had to spend on armor that we ended up losing. So really, the magic number here is 708k silver per hour. So I am wearing a different gear set. I'm gonna go back to the bank real quick and we'll cut the video and I'll show you the set that I was actually running when I ran these dungeons. All right, we are back on the island and we have our set. So I was running the Expert's Cleric Cowl just for the ice block, just to block some damage in the dungeon, but we also just wanted the increased damage. So we ran aggression on that. We have the Mage Robe as well as running aggression, and we are running the Frost Shield just for some extra defense in the dungeon. It doesn't matter what run you use, but we did have the Master Scholar Sandal on with aggression. And we had the Master Nature Staff. We were running both of the damage abilities on it, as well as the E, but we ran Calmness just to get a little bit more damage resistance, as well as a 5.1 torch. So this is the helm is enchant 2. The boots are not. I wouldn't get too specific on it. The thing was is that we were trying to push above 1150 item power to run these dungeons. Overall, they were relatively hard to clear, which I think is what put us at a 13-hour mark. And we're not risking the Husky, but we are risking around, if you include a horse, around 160k, a tier 3 or probably a tier 3 horse. We're risking around 160k a run. We kind of switched it up with some different armor pieces. That's why we did lose 280k and not a flat 320k with 2 deaths. But you can switch it up with these. It was just a lot easier because what we would do when we hop in the dungeon is we would switch to our healing abilities while we're waiting for that 90-second cooldown. If someone does come in while we still have like 30 seconds for the ability to get another shield, when we hopped out of the dungeon, we would just heal ourselves and prolong the fight until we could hop out of the dungeon. But other than that, we try to keep the build as cheap as possible. I didn't want to go out running like tier 8 enchant gear, like just clearing dungeons at the speed of light, because realistically, a lot of players like you and like me, we're trying to keep our builds cheaper when we're clearing these dungeons. If you do have more money to spare and you want to try running higher level sets, you can. It's just I don't want to risk as much out there because there is a lot of groups and there is a lot of ganking groups that are smarter. If they see me hop out of the dungeon, 3 of their buddies might be waiting a little bit farther where my bubble is going to expire. They then kill my horse and they dismount me. Bunch of different things that can happen when someone sees that you have a higher value set, as well as seeing where you went into the dungeon. There's just a lot of factors that go into it. So what we did is we try to keep the build cheaper in a realistic way. So while we're out running these dungeons, we're not risking a lot. We're not worried about losing gear. We're not worried about losing silver investment because we're wearing high level gear. But pushing about 1150 to almost 1200, we were able to clear the dungeons. We would go down a couple times here and there, but we relatively were able to clear the dungeons. So we've gone over the build, we've gone over the loot as well as the math, and now I'm going to show you guys an actual dungeon and how I run them, as well as a little bit of tricks you can use to maybe get the dungeon that you go to saved, or a safer way to enter the dungeon so you don't have to deal with gankers as much. But just unfortunately in this one we did have 7 duds as compared to our last video. We only had 6. We got a lot of crap spawns, if I'm being honest. We got like those 2 in a row. We got another 2 in a row that kept spawning right in front of the portal, and there's someone that dove us or whatnot. So we are going to grab a horse, and with that horse on us we are risking well, let me put it on first. We are risking 154k, so not bad for running tier 8 scrolls. We're going to go here, we're going to pull up solo, and we're going to put tier 8, if I can even type it, and they're about 50,000 a piece right now. I think the highest I've seen them is 52, lowest I've seen is 48. It's not bad at all. So we're going to buy that. And here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to stand right here. Doesn't matter where you stand, but we're going to use it and proc the dungeon scroll. So here it goes. It's going to be spawning up here. The tier 8 dungeon will spawn in a tier 5 zone in the Outlands, which is amazing. Same for any other scroll that you run. Tier 7, tier 6, they will spawn in the tier 5 zone. This is unfortunately kind of close to a road, so this might get weird, but we'll see. So what we're going to do is we are going to run up to the portal. And it always seems that when I'm running one of these videos and I proc a portal for you guys, they never spawn close. They love to spawn far away so that we can just have to run all the way up to them. So here we go. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fast forward from this point, and I will meet you guys up at the portal. All right, so we are coming up on the portal now, and this is what we're going to do while we're running up on it. We are kind of sweeping the area a little bit, looking for names. So you want to look for names at the edge of your screen or anyone that could be hanging out. We want to check for anyone on the roads. All right, we still have like half of our invisibility left, so we can kind of play around with it. Really, what we don't want to happen is we don't want someone to see our dungeon with the butterflies on the outside, or fireflies, whatever they are. Because if they are actually paying attention and they see that they disappear, they know someone jumped in. So we're kind of like scanning around a little bit, scanning for different names, scanning for anyone that might be close. And we're looking pretty safe. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop in the dungeon. All right, now that we're in, and we probably could have done this before we hopped in, we're going to switch to our healing abilities. And now we have a 12-second cooldown. And for this one, instead of doing our timer right here, which you can still do the conventional 90-second timer right here, waiting for this number to hit 210, we're actually going to run forward into the dungeon. So for me, I usually just drop a little bit of passive heals so I can run through all these mobs. I don't use my run ability. Do not use your run ability. You need to save that. So try whatever you can not to use it, because if someone is right behind you, you need it to get out of the dungeon. Okay, now that we are a little bit farther in the dungeon, you can always push in a little bit further, just in case someone is following you all the way through. We're going to press the logout timer. Now, we can let this go to like 2:30 if we want. So here is a little thing about this trick though. So you are running deeper into the dungeon. We're doing this timer so that if someone does pop in and pop out low IQ style, and by low IQ I mean they're doing the dumb way to check a dungeon. They're just popping in and popping out. They're not doing anything fancy. But the thing is that if they jump in and they run up a little bit and check the tier of the mob. So for example, when we click on this mob, it shows that it's a tier 8 as well as it has the 16% stronger boost. So they know that this dungeon was procced by a scroll. If they are kind of smart about it, they're going to run forward, and when our timer's still not running, they're going to run forward and check to see if we are deeper in the dungeon and left mobs behind to try and trick dungeon divers. So this is an extra little trick you can use to kind of like ignore people who are quick diving dungeons, especially in front of the portal. If your dungeon spawns right next to the portal and you get in before someone sees the butterflies, they might not check the tier of the mobs. They might just hop in, hop out just to see if anyone hopped into the dungeon. But I did stop the timer, so we're probably good right about here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run back. Again, I run the nature staff just because I like running the nature staff, but it also has the heals that I can use at any time that I want. Which is really nifty for getting out of sticky situations while running these dungeons. And the nature staff in general has a really good clear. So if you are looking for a weapon just to make money and to clear dungeons really easily, I do recommend running the one-handed or any kind of nature staff. Usually a blight or a one-handed. Usually the one-handed just because the E has a little bit of extra damage once you pile on 3 ticks of thorn. But yeah, you have the AoEs and everything, but that is the way that you're going to be running these dungeons, looking at the timer. And then we also had the spawn buff up here, which you can't see now, but when we hop out of the dungeon, you'll see that I won't have, I'll have a 1-minute timer before I can get my next spawn buff. But you can either run it from here or you can run straight inside. So we're going to jump out. And what happens when you jump in the dungeon is this is what's going to happen. This little symbol is going to pop up right here. You cannot gain a spawn buff right now, and it's a 1-minute timer. So, and we do have groups right here that are running around looking for dungeons to dive. I mean, we have a bloodletter and death givers. Like, these guys are just begging to dive some dungeons. Not risking much either. Like, it's just that's the way of the beast right there. We're going to run back this way. And I'm just going to teleport back because I'm not that worried about this at all. But I'll meet you guys on the guild island. So are tier 8 flat dungeons worth running in Albion Online in 2022? And if we're comparing it to the tier 7 dungeons, the answer is no. Tier 8 dungeons are not worth running. The only reason they would be worth running is if you are trying to get extra fame and you're willing to risk higher item power gear. Then you can clear tier 8 dungeons faster, you can get more fame, and you can also work towards getting loot that's inside those dungeons. Just the difference is not only are the scrolls more expensive, so when you get dungeon dove, you take a loss of 50k per dungeon as opposed to around 17 to 20k with tier 7s, but the profit's just not there. So if we include everything with the loss, which was what we want to include, we're only making 708k per hour as opposed to the tier 7 dungeons on the 12-hour run that we did with only 6 duds. We were making 717k per per hour. And that is going to be it for the video, guys. I hope you learned something, and I hope you got your question answered for Albion Online in 2022, if it's worth it to run tier 8 flat dungeons. If you have any tips or anything to add, make sure to leave it in the comments. I try to read all the comments and reply to every single one of you. And if you did like the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And other than that, I will see you all in the next video, and I will see you all in Albion Online.